How's everybody doing? It's 9 a.m. here. I'm located in Belgium. Feel free to post in the chat where you're from, and we'll go right ahead and get started. So I'll share my screens here. And so basically, this is the first of a 4-part series of DevNation deep dives, specifically for telco. But if you're not telco, that's fine too, because it's not anything necessarily specific to telco. So today we're gonna talk about Linux. We're gonna do first kind of steps in the world of Linux. In 2 weeks, my colleague Natale will go a little bit deeper into Linux. Then another 2 weeks later, my colleague Hans-Peter will go and talk about containers. And then you'll see me back 2 weeks after that on April 27th, even though on the invite it still says TBD. And you'll see me back to talk about Quarkus, which is a supersonic subatomic Java. So stay tuned for that. Anyway, so today we're talking about Linux. And so let's start our little deep dive here. So there are 2 links here. We have the dndev/Linux tutorial, and we have the dndev/Linux workshop. And so basically the first link is a link to what I'm going to be going through with all the steps that I'll be doing, how to even download a version of RHEL for free, how to install it on a virtual machine, and how to get registered and everything. But you'll see most of that in the demo today. And then the second one is a link to the slide deck that I'm using right here, so you have it right there. And so if you want, you can follow along. Maybe I can even try to copy and paste these links for you real quick in the chat. There we go. And there we go. I don't know if you can click on them, but I'm sure you can copy and paste. All right, so who am I? I'm Kevin Dubois. I'm a developer advocate at Red Hat. I'm a software engineer. So I have about 18 years of experience by now, I think, working in the software industry, working mostly with Java. Also, I did some Python development and some PHP development. And as a developer, I've been also using Linux since about 2007 as my daily driver. So I do all my development work on Linux. Even in my personal life, I mostly use Linux because it just works for me, I guess. So if you have questions afterwards, in the chat, I would say, post them in English. But if you want to reach out to me afterwards, you can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Mastodon. There's a YouTube channel with a few videos. You can find me on LinkedIn and on github.com/kdubois. That's kind of hidden, but so feel free to reach out in one of those languages. So English, Dutch, French, or Italian. And yeah, looking forward to touching base with you. So who am I? I'm also passionate about improving the developer experience with open source. I'm very passionate about open source. And so, of course, Linux fits right into that, right? So let's jump right in. So the agenda for today, we're going to be talking, surprise, about Linux, of course. We're going to be talking about RHEL, the Red Hat Enterprise Linux version of Linux. We're going to be talking about the UBI, the Universal Base Image, that we can use as a base image for building containers. I'll show you real quick how to register a RHEL system so that it's subscribed and so you can get support for it. And then we'll run through some basic commands, how to make a directory, how to copy files and stuff like that. So file operations, find out, what is my username and stuff like that. And we're going to install some software on our Linux machine. And then we'll take a look at systemd and how we can view the services that are running on our machine, how we can control those. We'll take a quick look at Cockpit, which is pretty handy, especially if you're not super comfortable with the command line. That's the UI to control most of the configuration and management of your Linux machine. And then finally, we'll talk about permissions and ownerships of files. And then in 2 weeks, when we're going deeper into Linux, we'll be talking about different kinds of editors you can use with Linux. So there's Nano and Vim and stuff like that. Also, how to split your terminal windows and stuff like that. How to find and kill processes, gathering stats, looking at how to open ports, working with SSH, and then an overview of SC Linux, and that's secure Linux, and that's kind of important too, right? Especially if you want to use your Linux in production, but even on my local machine, it's important to have security too, of course. So maybe a quick poll for those who are here. If you want to quickly scan that and let me know if you kind of identify more as a developer or a system administrator or an IT manager. That would be interesting to know. So I'll leave that up for just a second. Okay. In the meantime, I will continue with our basics. Sorry, just some technical difficulties. All right, there we go. Okay, so basics about Linux. So what is Linux? Linux is obviously an operating system. So just like Windows or Mac OS. So Linux is an operating system that is fully open source, and you have a lot of contributors working together on the core of Linux. So basically, it's a system that manages your hardware, your resources, like your CPU, your memory, your storage, and everything. And then, the operating system kind of sits between applications and hardware and makes the connections between all of your software and the physical resources that do the work. So how does Linux work? So basically, you have a kernel, that's the core of Linux. And then you have a user namespace, a system user namespace with kind of specific configurations for the specific operating system. And then you have applications that run on top of it. So the kernel is going to be the same, no matter what Linux system you use. And then, based on the flavor, it's going to be a little different. Just need 1 second here. Very sorry. All right, so what is Red Hat Enterprise Linux? So basically, it is a specific flavor of Linux, so developed by Red Hat. And what Red Hat does is, based on the Linux kernel, build an operating system that is secured, that is tested, stabilized, and everything by the Red Hat engineers. And so that's what we're going to be using today, and that's what you can download as well. And so if you start from our link here, developers.redhat.com/products/rel, that's where you can download a free version of RHEL as a developer. So for your local machine, you just have to create an account on developers.redhat.com, and then you can download RHEL and start running it. So that's what I did, and that's what we'll be using in our lab. So UBI is kind of a container-specific operating rel that is specific for running as containers. So it, removes kind of a lot of the things that you don't need for running a container, and so it also has less of an attack surface because it doesn't have all the tooling necessarily that you would have on a regular operating system. So if somebody kind of gets hold of that container, they can't run specific commands and everything. But the rel UBI is really interesting as a base container because it is supported by Red Hat if you run it on OpenShift on rel, and so it's supported and secured and stabilized and everything. So the rest of this session is a live coding session. So I'll just kind of guide you through some of the cool capabilities of Linux and specifically today about rel. So we'll jump right into that. So what I did was I went to to developers.redhat.com, downloaded rel ISO, and so if you look at the link that I sent with the instructions, I can paste this one as well. Oh, there we go. So you'll have instructions. First of all, we'll tell you a little bit about Linux, just kind of what I told you, and then in the installation, how to download it, how to log into your Red Hat account, and then in this specific, in our tutorial, we'll show you how to install it on VirtualBox, because you can install VirtualBox on any operating system, basically. Me personally, I have libvirt on my local machine because I'm running a version of Linux already, Linux Fedora, which is the upstream, which is the kind of community version where Red Hat, does its experimental development for rel. So this eventually, the version that I'm running is the latest version of Fedora, which will be tested and stabilized for kind of enterprise use, and then will end up being the next version of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So in this case, so you would install VirtualBox on whatever operating system you have, and then install rel, the version that you downloaded, into that. So I've already done that because otherwise we'd be taking too long. But so here you can see I have Red Hat Enterprise Linux 9.1 as the latest version at this time. And so basically I can start it, and then my operating system will start in a virtual machine on top of my Fedora host. So this is a rel Red Hat Enterprise Linux operating system virtual machine running right here. So real quick, to go back to the tutorial here, we can see how to register a rel system, because when you download the operating system, you have access to that for free. You also have access for a free subscription, developer subscription, to get, to stay updated and everything. But you do need to register your system. So you can see how to do that here. Subscription manager, register with the username that you got from developers.redhat.com program with the password, and then auto attach that subscription to your version. So I've already done that, but I can show you. So here I'm logged into my rel machine. In my case, this is a version that also has the UI, but I could have run this also headless, which means that there would not be any graphics. It would just put me in a terminal. So in this case, I'm gonna start it right now. So we're going to start with our terminal. There we go. And so here, basically, you have access to the command line interface of rel. So with our subscription manager that I was showing, so subscription manager, I would do register if I hadn't been registered yet. So in this case, what I have to do is log in as root. And that gives me all the privileges to do kind of everything on the system. Whereas if I was logged in as Dubois, I would only be able to do stuff that my user Dubois would be allowed to do, and that's not necessarily managing system packages and everything. So in this case, I've logged in as root, and now if I go to subscription manager, register, it says the system is already registered, but so that's how you can see that. So subscription manager, you can see you can do different things with it, including my current status, and it tells me what the status is. So let's go through some basic commands now. So the first one that we can do is a simple who am I? And that basically just tells me what user I'm currently logged in as and running as in my terminal. So in this case, I am running as root. If I exited out of the root login, I would go back to where I was logged in previously, which is as Kevin Dubois. And so if I did who am I now, it would say K Dubois. But I'll log in as root for the rest of this tutorial because we're going to do kind of some things that you will need root privileges for. So who am I just shows the username. There's also who, and that shows a little bit more information. So it shows not the user that I'm running as right now, but the user that I'm logged into the system with. So K Dubois with a terminal interface, and it shows how long the system has been running, so it gives you a little bit more information. So a really handy command in Linux is man. So man stands for manual, and so you can do like, hey, what's the command, who am I, what does that actually do? I can look that up with man, and then it gives me a bunch of information. So in this case, you can see the name. So what's the name of this program? So who am I? Short synopsis, the description, and so on and so forth. So for every command, there's a man. So you can also even do manual of the manual. So man, and then it tells you also kind of what you can do with the man command, which ironically is kind of handy too. Okay. And so you can see here at the bottom, to exit out of it, you press quit. So Q, and we're back to our command line. There's also kind of a simpler way, a very short way of seeing the description of the command that you want to run. So, and that's what is. So what is, who am I? And then it just shows who am I? Well, it prints the effective user ID. So that way we see, kind of in a shorter way what it is. A lot of commands also have, like if you do the command and then you hit enter, well, who am I? And you do -H, for example, a lot of the times it'll tell you also some information directly here. So for example, the command DNF -H shows me all the different options that command has. All right, so if I want to reboot my machine, that's also pretty easy. It's just reboot. If I was not logged in as root, it would be sudo reboot. So sudo basically, and I'll show you this real quick. So sudo lets me run a command from a non-root user as a root user. So sudo reboots as my regular user. It's going to ask me for a password, or in this case, I was already logged in. And so now we're actually rebooting our system. So we'll take just a moment so that I can have a little drink. And then in just a moment, we're back. Here we go. So our system has rebooted, and we'll go back to the terminal. If you have any questions, definitely post them in the chat, and I'll try to answer them on the fly or after the session. As if it's an easy question, I'll try to answer it immediately, and if not, we'll try to answer it at the end. Okay, so we'll go into some commands to work with files now. So the first command is ls, and ls is short for list. So ls shows me the list of files and directories of the directory that I'm in right now. So there's also ls-la, and that shows me some more information about the file. So it also shows the hidden files that start with a dot. So for example, excuse me, there's a bash history, a bash logout, and everything that wasn't shown if I just did ls. And it kind of orders it in a different way, and it shows me some more information about the file. So for example, it shows me, so basically in Linux, you have 3 different kind of levels of access to files. So you have the actual user that I'm logged into, or no, sorry, the owner of the file. And so RWX, so read, write, execute, you see that there's 3 times this possibility of RWX here in this list. And so the first 3 are for the owner of the file. So if I'm, as the owner, Dubois, trying to access this file, this is what applies to me. So I can read, write, and execute this file. The next 3 are the group. So if I am not the owner of the file, but I'm part of the group that has access to this file, and that's this second column here, which in this case is also called Dubois, but it could have been a different group name. Then this set of rules would apply to me, which is R and X, which means that I can read the file, I can execute the file, but I can't write to the file. I don't have access to that. And the third set is for anyone else. So if you're not part of the user, not part of the group, these are the privileges that you have. So in this case, anybody can read and execute this file, but if, for example, in this case, they would only be able to read and not execute because the X is missing. So this is just a simple kind of list of the files that that we have in this directory. So now we can try to create a new directory. So we do mkdir. So that stands for make dir. And so yeah, let's do that. Make dir demo. And be careful in Linux, if I write uppercase or lowercase, those are treated differently. So if I create a directory demo, you can see that now I have a directory demo. If I now make a directory uppercase demo, you can see that there are 2 directories, right? There's a lowercase and there's an uppercase. So that's something to be aware of. So then I can remove a directory or a file with rm, and we'll do that in just a second. So first, we're going to go into one of the directories. So we'll go into the lowercase demo, and we're going to create a file. So we'll clear my screen so it's a little easier to follow. And so you can create a file in a few different ways. An easy one is to say touch, and touch basically just touches a file, which means if it doesn't exist, it's going to create it. So we're going to make a first file, file1.txt. And so now if we look in our directory with ls, you can see file1.txt has been created, which is just an empty file, an empty, in this case, text file. Now, if I wanted to, for example, copy this file, I can do cp, that stands for copy, file1, so the name of the file, and then file2.txt as the name that it needs to copy to. And then in this case, we see, sorry, I did ll instead of ls. The ll is not always available in every Linux system, but in RHEL it is, and it's just a shortcut for lsla, which shows me the list of files kind of with the more detail, right? So we have file1 and file2 in this case, so we copied our file. And so I could move a copy, you know, like move to a different directory. So let's say I make a new directory, demo in demo. And so now we'll see that there's a directory demo in demo, and I want to move my file2.txt to the demo in demo. So move file2 to the directory that I want to move it to. What I could also do is rename it as I'm moving it. So I could call it file 2 renamed.txt. So now if we look at our directory here, we can see that file 2 has disappeared, and it's, well, hopefully it's in demo and demo, right? So let's see, it's at cd, demo and demo, and a list, and sure enough, there it is with the rename file. So that's how you can move and rename files and everything. So now I said, you can also delete directories and files. So let's first go into cd, demo and demo, and remember, there's a file 2 in there, rm file 2 rename.txt. So rm is going to remove the file. And so sure enough, there's no more file in here. Now, if I want to delete a directory, so I want to delete the demo in demo, I have to do rm. But if I do just rm, it's not going to work. And it says cannot remove demo and demo. It is a directory. So that's kind of a safeguard to make sure that you're not accidentally deleting, wanting to delete just a file and you happen to blow away an entire directory. That's not so not so ideal. So you have to do rm r, so recursive demo and demo, and then it's going to delete the directory and everything that's in there. All right. So that's, some basic file commands to get started. So copy, make a directory, move a file, and everything. So of course, it's an operating system, and we might want to install some more stuff in our operating system. So for example, maybe I want to install the npm package. So in RHEL and in Fedora and in CentOS, there's a package manager called DNF. So, and you have to use elevated admin privileges to be able to do that. So I could either do sudo DNF, or I can log in as root, and then the rest of the commands are done as root. So, we can do sudo DNF. It's going to ask me for my password to log in as root to make sure that somebody didn't just walk up to my computer and started doing things. It wants to make sure that it's me. And so in this case, DNF, if I run the command without any parameters, it's going to say, hey, you need to add some parameters. Here's some suggestions of what you might want to do. So this package manager, so let's log in as root. And see at which repositories I have currently defined for my package manager to look for files in. So DNF repo list is how we can do that. So repo list is going to show the repositories that are registered right now for my system, which is the RHEL 9 appstream RPMs and the base OS RPMs. So you can add more repositories, kind of like in Maven, you can add more sources where you can look for libraries. So in this case, I only have those 2, but if there was a specific repository that I wanted to get packages from, I could add those. So in this case, this is what we're going to see if I can find my npm package in the default repositories from supplied by Red Hat by RHEL. So these are packages that we also support, of course, which is pretty important when you're running on production, of course. So in this case, DNF, and I'm going to search for the npm package. So DNF search npm is going to search through the repositories, and it found an npm package. And so if we want to install it now, we can do DNF install npm, and then the npm. So if I want to do, let's say build a Node.js application or something, or a React or whatever, then I need that npm package. And so yes, I want to install it. And then it also says what the dependencies are, and it's going to install those components as well. So you can see it's downloading the packages from the repository and installing them. And now if I run npm, we can see that it is installed. and I can start using it. But of course, this isn't a course on NPM. And so in this case, we're just going to remove the package because maybe I decided I don't want to use it after all. NPM remove, sorry, DNF remove NPM. And then we're going to remove the package NPM and the dependencies that it has that are unused. So it's smart enough to figure out, hey, you also installed some packages that are dependent on this. You know, if you don't want those anymore, we're going to automatically remove them too. So you could say, no, I don't want that. But in this case, yep, that's fine. And we're going to erase it. And that's how we work with packages that are supplied in one of these resource lists. So next, there's systemd. So systemd is how you can control services that run on your system. So systemd is managed by the command systemctl, system control, systemctl. And so, you know, we can run that command without any parameters, and it's going to show me all the services that are running in my machine, which is you know, quite a few. But so we can, for example, control systemctl. We can see what, for example, the status is of a specific service that is running. So systemctl, for example, status, and then maybe the SSH server, because usually if you're running a Linux server, you might want to SSH, you know, so remotely access the terminal of a Linux machine, and so that's through SSH, of course. And so systemctl status sshd. So the SSH daemon. So is it running or not? We're going to find out. It is. It's active and running. And we can see how long it's been running. So for 12 minutes, because that's, I guess, when we started up or rebooted our machine. Now, what's also interesting is this loaded part. So this loaded part shows if this service is going to be able to be run when you start up your system. So in this case, that's true. It's enabled. So that when it's enabled here, that means at startup time, it's going to start up this particular service. So in this case, my SSHD is running. So it's listening at port 22 for SSH connections for somebody who has access to the system, but we haven't exposed the port or anything externally from my VM, so that's that should be fine. But maybe I don't want to run this service on the system. Then I can do systemctl stop SSHD, and that's going to stop that service. So now if we do status again, we can see that the status is inactive. Now, keep in mind, because it is enabled, if I restart my machine, it's going to start back up, right? So maybe that's not what we want. We want to disable it so it doesn't start up anymore. System, then let's clear real quick so everybody can see. Systemctl disable SSHD. And so that basically makes it so that next time I start up my machine, it's not going to start up the SSHD service. If I do want that, then it's as simple as systemctl enable SSHD, and now it is going to start up again next time. And if we want to start it right away, system control start SSHD. And again, if we go look at the status, it is active, it is running, and it is enabled to start up automatically. So that's how you can control services on your RHEL machines. So we've been looking at a few things in the CLI. So like I said, my RHEL machine here actually is kind of a desktop version in the sense that I also have a UI here, right? So I can also use the UI to, for example, run Firefox or whatever here on my machine. But let's say that you're running on a RHEL machine where you don't have access to a UI. So what you could do is install this, this package called Cockpit. So remember DNF, that's how we install, that's the package manager. So we can use DNF to install, for example, Cockpit. Install. If I do -y, it's going to automatically say, yes, I want to install whatever I'm going to supply and its dependencies. So DNF install, yes, Cockpit. And you can see it's going to install Cockpit and its dependencies, which include a few things like JQ, some Python packages, and so on and so forth. And so in a moment, we'll see that everything is installed. And then we need to enable this service now. So again, system control enable now Cockpit socket. So we were going to enable the Cockpit socket. So if you look at the documentation, you'll see that this is what you need to do to get it started. So what's interesting, sorry, I'll go back to the CLI here real quick, is that it shows that it started up the socket and it's running on port 9090. So here we can go to our browser, in this case, handy that I already started up, localhost 9090, and you can see there's an actual kind of interface running in a browser. So like if you were running a RHEL machine without a user interface, you could access, if you opened, of course, this port 9090, you could access this from outside of the server to be able to access some administrative privileges. So in this case, I'm going to log in as my user, and I get a really nice dashboard with information about my system. So for example, I can see metrics, I can see hardware details of my machine, configuration, and so in this case we can see that how much load there is, how much memory is being used by this virtual machine, and so on and so forth. I can also go look at the accounts that are on this machine. So if you have worked a little bit with Linux, for me personally, I use Linux as a developer, not necessarily as an admin, but I have had to work as an admin in some cases as well. And you have to remember a lot of commands, and one in particular is like, for example, creating new users that can access your system, because you don't want everybody to log in as the same user, because then you can't see who did what. You want everybody to have their own user that you can give certain privileges to, add to specific groups, to have role-based access control and everything. And so you could do that via the CLI, or you could just use Cockpit to create a new account. In this case, YouTube user, and we can give them a password automatically here as a default, or we could we could leave that blank and require them to create a new password, or we can use both. So require password change on the first login. So when they log in, they have to set their own password, which is probably safer, right? And so then we can create this user, and now they can log in technically to this system. You can, so you can do a bunch of different things here. You can even access the containers that are running on that machine. So in this case, none, because I haven't started Podman or anything on my local machine. But we'll look at containers a little bit further in the next session with Hans Peter in 4 weeks. So, but be aware that Cockpit can do a bunch of stuff here. It can manage the software updates as well. So you can see which packages are out of date. So in this case, I already have some packages that are out of date and that I could install here, or I can go back and if I wanted to do this in the CLI, DNF updates, and then it would also install those packages. So in this case, DNF update would find, these are the packages that need updated from this version to this version. And then it'll check with me, hey, is this okay? We're going to be downloading 275 megs for these new packages. In this case, I'm going to say no, because I don't want to wait for that during this demo. But yeah, so that's how you could do that. What we also typically need to do on a Linux system is change the permissions and ownerships of files. So for example, in this case, in my demo folder, I only have this file 1.txt. It's owned by the user K Dubois, who is part of the group K Dubois, right? And so me as user root, that's what I'm logged into right now. I obviously, I kind of have superpowers. I have access to everything. But let's say as root, now I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to touch file 3.txt. And now if we look at the list again, we can see that this file 3, is owned by user root, who is part of the group root. And so if I exit out of the from the root user back into my K Dubois user, now if I want to access this file, it's going to depend, right? So because I'm not the user root, I'm not part of the root user group, I am part of the other group. And so in this case, there's an R, so that means I can read the file. Now it's an empty file, so it's not going to give us a lot of information, but so there's a cat command that just basically shows you what's in a file. And in this case, you can see it's empty, of course. But so if I wanted to change some things in my file 1, I could use a variety of editors, and we're going to go into more details about that in the next course. But I could modify that file, and then we would see some information. But anyway, so if I wanted to modify file 3, I'm going to have a problem. So I can read it, right? Remember, so I can see what's in it, but look at it, it says read only. So if I start writing something in here and I save it, and don't worry about how this works, we'll look at that later. Oh, I get an error. It says read only option is set. And so I can't modify this file as the user K Dubois. So I'm going to have to modify the privileges to be able to do that. So as the root user, you can do that. As the K Dubois user, I can't. So I can do sudo, though. That gives me access if I'm part of the sudo group, the group that can do root modifications. And then I can say change mod, and change mod basically means change the access rules. And so, for example, there's this 777, which gives you full access. The 7 gives you read, write, execute for the user, the next 7 for the group, and the next 7 for the user. So, oops, of course, I need to tell them which file it is. So file 3.txt. And I have to supply my password, because after a little while it asks for the password to make sure that nobody else walked up to my computer that I might have left unlocked. So they now have access. So now we can see that this has changed, right? So before it was read write for the user, read for everybody else, and now you can see that it's read write execute for everybody. So 777 gives you all the changes the access to a file to everything, which may not be what you want, but this makes it a little easier. And you can see the file is in green, which means it's executable, which a text file executable probably doesn't make sense. But anyway, so now if I want to modify the file 3, and I save it, it works. And so if I now do cat to see what's in the file, we can see here that test has been added to the file. So you can also change the owner of a file. So in this case, maybe I want this file to be owned by me. And so change ch own owner file3 file3.text. So if you start typing a file, you can just hit tab and then it auto completes, or it does a lot of auto completion if you use tab, of course. So change own file text3 to K Dubois as a user, colon, and then the name of the group. So it could be K Dubois. We can do it like that. And I think I need to do it like this. Change own file3.text. And it says change ownership operation not permitted because I'm trying to change the file that's owned by root by K Dubois, and that's not allowed. So we can do sudo in the same command change own, or there's a handy little command in Linux, double exclamation point, that repeats the command from before, pre-appended with what I added. So in this case, we're only changing the file, and we can see now it's owned by K Dubois, and I can do with it what I want because I'm the owner. Okay. So I've been using for the editor right now, I've been using the vi command, but maybe I like the full Vim, and I want to install a specific version of Vim. So what I could do is go to GitHub and download a specific version of Vim or whatever package I want and build it myself. So not use the package manager DNF, but actually build it from source. So for example, here, I'm going to download the specific version v9, blah, 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 from the Vim GitHub. So I went to GitHub and found this package. I know, who the maintainer is. And so I'm going to download that into my demo folder. And so if we look at the list, we can see, hey, this file has now appeared, and I downloaded it as K Dubois, so it is owned by K Dubois. So if I want to extract the archive, because it's a tar gzip, right? So tar x for extract, v because of the type of gzip of this tar file, and then f for the file, and then v9, blah, blah, blah. And now we're going to extract this archive. We'll clear it, list, and we can see there's a new folder, vim, blah, blah, blah. And so now we can build it from scratch. So we'll need to go into the Vim folder, and we can see there's a bunch of files. And in this case, I know that I need to configure it. So we're going to configure it. So that with configure, you will analyze our system and then produce a make file that's going to contain the logic to actually install our file. So this is the make file that was created by our configure command. And so now if we do make, we're going to generate the binaries from that source code. So the executable binaries. And then after that, we're going to do make install to actually install those binaries on our local machine. So this takes a small moment. If you have any questions, definitely post them in the chat. I see a few good morning messages. I don't see any questions. Or you can post where you're from. So this takes a little while in the meantime. So right now I have Cockpit installed, right, to see all my system here in the browser. But if I wanted to uninstall it, it would be using the same DNF commands, right? So sudo, because I'm not logged in as root, so either I need to log in as root, or I can just run one-off commands as with elevated privileges. So sudo DNF remove. Hi, Juan Francisco from Spain. So sudo DNF remove cockpit, and that's how I uninstall a package. And of course, we're going to be confirming that we want to remove it, and then of course we don't have cockpit running anymore. So all right, so we in our Vim window here, and in our next session we'll show how to split terminal views and everything, because right now I have kind of clunky different terminals here, and I have to switch between them. Sometimes it's handy to have multiple terminal windows, but Natali in the next session will show that. So in this case, all I need to do now to install it, because I created the binary with the make install, with the make command, and now we're going to do a make install to actually install Vim on our local machine, and it says permission denied because I need to be root. So remember the 2 exclamation points to repeat the same command as root. Now we're going to install it all, and if everything went well, maybe I'll clear my window to make it less cluttered. So Vim version, and we can see that effectively Vim has been installed from source, so not from the package manager, but actually from source, which sometimes, especially if you're doing development work, you're working on that code and you can build it like this on your local machine. So I could look at the source code, I can make changes to the Vim package on my local machine and build it from scratch that way. Maybe I want to contribute to the project or something, and then try to run it, and then I can also commit my changes, maybe create a pull request for the Vim package, and contribute to the project. Or in this case, I just want to run maybe a particular version, because maybe the latest version has something that's not compatible with my machine, or whatever reason there is. So in this case, let's cd ... to go up one directory, and now I want to remove all the Vim stuff. So remove R, right, for the directory rm r. Oops, my finger was a little too heavy on the S. There we go, rmr, and now the directory is gone, and now I also want to delete that file, so rm that file. And now all that stuff that we downloaded is gone, but I still have my Vim package. And I can, for example, modify my file 3.txt, because I do have access to it now, because I changed the owner to Dubois, and I have all that access. And so test 1, 2, 3. Oops, there we go. And cat file 3.txt shows me what's in that file, from the terminal, so I don't have to go actually in the file to see it. Let's see if I've missed anything in our tutorial. If not, what we can do, because we have a few more minutes, so maybe I can show you 1 or 2 more things, unless there are questions in the chat. So feel free to post them in the chat if you want. So I could, for example, install Podman. So Podman is basically kind of like Docker, a container management tool. Sudo dnf install will work better. And it says, actually, it was already installed. So rel comes out of the box with podman, so you can get going immediately with containers. So now podman ps shows me what containers are running on my local machine, but you'll see all this in our container workshop that's coming up in 2 weeks. So sometimes you'll see instructions for running containers, and they'll say Docker or something. And so in this case, because we don't have Docker installed, we have podman installed, this command wouldn't work. But again, rel is kind of smart enough to say, hey, this Docker command, we're not finding this on a local machine, but let's see what's in the package manager. And there's a podman Docker that you could install to provide a Docker alias to be able to run Docker commands, but as podman. So in this case, sure, let's do that. And we're automatically installing this. And now if I do Docker, you can see that it emulated my Docker command as using podman. So that's kind of handy little extra little thing. And I think that wraps up our session. So last call for any questions. If not, I will go back to the slides and show you real quick what we did today. So we registered a rel system. So remember, subscription manager register. So when you go to developers.redhat.com, you can download a version of rel for your local development. It's a free subscription for developers, and then you can register it to get updates that Red Hat provides. There's some basic commands that we went through. We did some file operations. We installed package software with DNF. Sometimes you'll also see yum, Y-U-M. That was a previous package manager that came with rel and Fedora. In newer versions, we use DNF, but I think you can still use yum. I'm not entirely sure, but use DNF in the newer versions. We looked at systemd to control system services. We looked at cockpit to have a UI, a browser-based UI to control and view our rel system. And we looked at permissions and ownerships. So I look and see there is a question: how to recover a deleted file in Linux. Well, that's complicated. I'm not sure if we address that in the next session, but maybe ask in the next session if it's not addressed. But basically, you need to be very careful on Linux, especially if you're using the terminal. If you delete a file, it's typically gone. So make sure that you back up and make sure that you know what you're doing. That's also why there's all the different kind of users and groups to control who can do what and when and so on and so forth. So yeah, be careful with that, I would say. And then off topic, how are you getting that app bar in Fedora? Well, I think it's -2doc. There's two of them. I think let's see. -2panel is what it's called. -2panel. So that gives, because the default Fedora doesn't show the application bar here at the bottom. It's very similar to the Fedora here, where it's at the top. So yeah, good question. All right. Any further questions? If not, thank you, and see you in 2 weeks for our further deep dive into Linux. And I'm sorry for the technical difficulties at the start, but yeah, we made it through, right? All right. Talk to you later. Have a nice rest.